Hey, Brian, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. Tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Brian Rodriguez, and I am the founder of a digital agency called Gatorworks that I started in New Orleans a long time ago.
When you right before you came on the show, I saw the name and I'm like, oh, please don't be going to the University of Florida. Like I was like, I was a little
No,
nervous.
no. I'm an LSU boy, so I started the agency actually when I was in high school. The year before I went into to LSU, and I think I might fit that category that I know you talk about as the accidental agency owner.
Yep.
And so this was back in 2001 when a lot of businesses didn't have websites. And so I started out that classic story of I was the young guy in the room that was just, you know, kind of knew how the tech worked and knew how to build websites. And so we did these super cheap $200 websites for small businesses.
Two hundred
And
dollars. Wow, that was way
oh, it was
500. You're cheap.
yeah. Oh, it was very cheap. And so I kind of realized early on that I personally was not very good at designing or developing the websites. So, but I really enjoyed the business side of it. That really energized me. So I surrounded myself with some local freelancers, and I would go try to find the client. I would pay the freelancers to design and then develop the sites. I'd pay them some money, and I'd try to keep a little bit of money for myself. And so, very humble beginnings.
So you started kind of a year before college. Did you do it through college or like
Yes.
part time or full time?
Yeah, I did. I did. So I spent 4 years at LSU in the College of Business, and I was able to kind of keep it going during that time as a student, and it was kind of fun. I remember I had this entrepreneurship class one of my last years at LSU, and we had to write a business plan. And so I tried my best to take some of the theory that you learn in college and actually apply it to my business. And so that was kind of cool. But yeah, when I got out of school in 2006 is when when I kind of realized, oh, wait, I think I can maybe do this as my career moving forward. So, and that's what I did. So I kind of, took a leap. I figured, I had nothing to lose. So what's the worst that could happen? I didn't have a wife or kids at the time. I did not own much of anything.
Mhm.
So I figured, yeah, let's go for it. And yeah, here we are.
After college, how long did it take you to start getting some momentum?
You know, I I would say about 5 years. Um, I started in May of '06, and it really wasn't until 2011 that I remember actually feeling like I was getting somewhere where it was no longer just this slog of cash flow issues and I mean you name it. We went through all the cycles of everything, and so I'd say it was a good 5 or 6 years before I truly felt like I was getting somewhere.
Well, what was the thing that happened, or what was the mentality shift in your brain to be like, hey, I finally feel like we really got a real business here? Because you know, you're just designing webs. Like when I was designing
Yeah,
websites, like, yeah, I was like, you're gonna give me how much to design? Like for many
yeah,
years, I was like, this is not a real business. Like anytime people are gonna figure me out.
yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, so we made a ton of mistakes in the beginning. I do think we did a relatively good job of learning from those mistakes, thank God. And I remember one of the things that I did was I hired this outsourced CFO where I remember in the summer of 2011, he sat down with me for 4 hours, kind of our kickoff session. And man, I learned so much about the financial aspect of my business in those 4 hours. I came out of that just eyes wide open, kind of blown away. And I learned so much in that one session. It was almost more than what I learned in business school.
It was
uh,
definitely more than you learned in business school. Come on,
yeah, I mean, yeah,
FSU, very similar.
yeah, yeah. Well, and so and so having that CFO, I met with him every single month for about 2 to 3 hours from that point forward for the next, I think it was like 7 years without missing 1 month at all. And I truly learned the financial aspect of my business, what my margins were, how to manage the financial side. And I think that, having that knowledge and learning that competency, I think gave me the confidence to keep going because I kind of had a better pulse on where we were as a business.
Well, I think a lot of times when we can get clarity in a direction, or even just a goal, or even like a solution to figure out something, it gives you so much more confidence going forward. Like, for example, let's say business of businesses in tough times, and you're just like, oh well, we're on a down trajectory. Well, how do you stop it? But then as soon as you come up with like an idea, even if it doesn't work, you're like, okay, like I got this. Like if this idea didn't work, I'll try another one. Versus like just going, well, let's see what just happens. Coming to us. what, were-
Absolutely. Yeah.
what were some of the key KPIs that he or she helped you kind of start looking at that gave you some more confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the the easiest one that I recall was he showed the basic breakdown of top line revenue and then your cost of goods sold, your gross profit, your overhead expense, and then your net income at the bottom. I think having and then he gave me some benchmarks of what those percentages should be. So I remember, if you had 100 at the top, then 65% cost of goods sold gives you a 35% gross margin. If you spend 25% on overhead expenses, that'll leave 10% at the bottom. That was sort of the minimum viable
Mhm.
business, and really our goal was to have a 50% gross margin. So that was really the KPI. But
What
just
were,
wrapping my head around that one concept was huge.
yeah. What was the goal for your net margins?
So I remember at the time the minimum was the 10%. The goal was really more like 15%. And then if I were driving greater than 15% at the bottom, that was considered a really good year. That was we really crushed it if we were closer to that 20% down at the bottom.
Interesting. I always like to see how people think on that. I always tell everybody like our net margins that we always went after were over 30%.
So at
And
the very bottom,
at the very bottom.
man,
Yeah.
that's solid.
Yeah. And and that's usually around the average that I see a lot of times too.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times when you do start looking at those numbers, what you start realizing is, or like in the very beginning, I'd be curious on this, right? I'm sure, in the very beginning, or even a couple years into it, right? Like we'll be like, man, I want to double my revenue. What do people think? I got to double the amount of clients I got to get.
Yep. Oh
Absolutely
yeah.
the wrong answer in most cases, right?
Hmm.
Some cases there are, like if you're building a factory, hell yeah, double your clients. But I always would say, like, once you start looking at the numbers and really understanding the numbers, be like, man, how can I take my 10% margin and make it 30%? What do I need to do? Well, I need to raise my prices. I need to figure out how can I streamline, you know, my my operations and not charge hourly. Like I would just start,
Hmm.
that's how I started thinking. And then like when I was able to do that, I was like, wow, this really actually works.
Yeah, 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 no, definitely. Yeah, well, so since those days though of working with our CFO, because that was kind of that time period of say 2011 through 2017 ish. Um, so we've added the digital marketing aspect of our business, and really that was a game changer. So in 2013, we started to realize just the the challenges associated with doing just project work. So just, you're only as good as your next project when it's websites and graphic design and that sort of thing. So towards the middle to end of 2013, we realized, okay, we can be much more strategic with our clients. We can provide a recurring revenue stream where you create predictable revenue. And if we were able to bring services, well, so we started out with SEO and Google Ads, and then quickly followed it up, over the last
Yeah.
few years after 2013 with a whole suite of digital marketing services. So it's been the profitability. We've been able to bring more down to the bottom. We've been able to make it a lot more predictable, and so that was a pretty big game changer for us.
So you exited in 2017. What was the reason why? Were you looking to sell? Did someone approach you?
Yeah, I was not looking to sell. And so over the years, I'd had various businesses reach out, looking for, usually it was a strategic buyer, like it was maybe a software development company that thought they could add marketing services because they were talking to our type of client, like that kind of thing. And pretty much every time I would take the meeting and then I would not move forward. And so in the fall of 2016, I kind of expected to do that same thing, where by 2016, I was feeling great about where I had the business. We were just under 1 million in revenue. At that point, what I guess I was married, no kids yet, but life was good. The business was doing well. It was profitable. It was becoming more predictable, and things were good. So I did not expect to really go down that road. But yeah, so a local traditional media company reached out. So they own 5 radio stations here in the southern Louisiana region, and a very successful company, been around for, actually in 2026 will be their 100th year in business. And so just a very well respected institution. And I took the lunch, and after the lunch, I went home to my wife, was like, yeah, really nice guys. Probably don't think it'll go anywhere, but I might learn something by going through the process. So I'll at least talk to them and maybe just kind of see what I learn. And so, um, yeah, we kind of kept talking that fall of 2016, and they kept saying things that that I typically would use as a disqualifier, but they kept promising me the things like, I remember one sticking point was, okay, I told my team that we were going to move into a cool new office. I need to go find that. If I sell the business, I don't want to move into their old office. No offense, they have a great institution, but they're just in an old space. And I'm like, culturally, I want to be able to find a new space. Well, that was one of the things where they were like, yeah, we'll find you a space and we'll make it cool and we'll give you a budget to build it out. I was like, oh darn. Okay. So they checked that box. And so they just kept checking all these boxes like, oh, okay, you can keep your brand. You can remain as the CEO, keep all of your people, continue to build it the way you see fit. You can keep all of your clients. You can control the pricing. I kept trying to throw things at them and find reasons to walk away. And they kept saying, yep, you could do that. Yep, we're good. We're good. We're good. And so by the spring of 2017, I was kind of like, okay, I guess let's see what they offer. And so they gave me an offer, and I was like, okay, yeah, definitely not high enough. It's not, for all the blood, sweat, and tears and years of trying to build a company, that's not going to work. So I told them that, and they said, okay, well, give us some time. We'll give you another offer. I said, okay. So they came back a week or two later, gave me another offer. I told them again, no, thanks, but no thanks. I don't think that's going to work. A few weeks later, they came back with a third offer, and it still wasn't going to make sense for me financially. So then I said no again. And at that point, I really thought we were done. I was like, okay, this is extremely distracting, extremely stressful. My wife actually ended up getting pregnant right during that process. So I'm like, oh my God, now we're going to have our first kid. Life was just crazy. And so I thought we were walking away. And so, meanwhile, another local media company approached me, wanted to buy our company. Um, which was just kind of crazy at the time. So I said, okay. And I told him, in full disclosure, I have another company that just tried this, but okay, I'll still meet with you. I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to play games or anything. He provided an offer, and it was pretty similar to that first one that I gotten from the first media company. So that's probably what the company was actually worth, truly. And I said, no, we're good. And so after that, I was like, okay, this was like 8 months of just a lot of
Takes a lot out of you.
it really does, and providing answers to all these questions and providing financials and just the whole thing, the whole song and dance. So I remember it was the weekend. I think it was maybe Easter weekend. I got a text from the first company, and they said, "Look, let's, what can we do to make this work?" And I was like, "Man, I don't think anything, but if you did provide an offer in this range, I would strongly consider it." And I texted a number over, and they were like, "Holy crap! No way we would ever do that." I was like, "Okay, that's fine. I'm not, no skin off my back." And so, but sure enough, a day or two later, they called and they were like, "Hey, let's just get together and just talk this out." And I'm like, "Oh, God, this is just too much at this point." And so I told my wife, I wrote out sort of some numbers on a sheet of paper for my wife. I was like, "Look, this is going to be in my pocket during that meeting. And if they don't meet these numbers, it's, I'm walking out. It's going to be over." She said, "Okay, cool." And so I go to the meeting, and we're just talking in circles, basically. Like, they say their piece, why they think their offers are strong. I say my piece on why I just can't sell at that amount. And we go back and forth, and I forget how long. I mean, it seemingly was an hour at least. And then one of my answers to something that they had asked me, I kind of threw in my that's a number that was just a hair lower than the original text where they said it was a crazy number. So I come down just a hair, but it was still above the number that was written on that sheet of paper in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, "Oh, wait." And they were like, "Okay, can you excuse us for a minute?" It was the CEO and CFO of the media company. I said, "Sure." They left the room for 20 minutes, and I'm just sitting there. Like, what is going on? And then they came back, and he said, "Okay, Brian, take out a sheet of paper and write this down." And he starts calling off different numbers. One was like a one-time payout. Then it was in April when this was happening. So then they threw out another number, which was the anticipated number for what the company was worth for the time that I would own it during the due diligence period. I wrote that down. Then they threw out a number for value of some shares of stock of the holding company. So I wrote that down. And those were the three main things. And then I totaled all of that up, and it came out to the number that was in my pocket. And then I
So
was
that was a cash offer, partly cash, I presume, right?
yeah,
Ownership or stock options in the media company.
correct.
And then was there, obviously, you're still with them many moons later, was part of the salary. And was there any kind of earnout as well?
No. So their original offers had an earnout. And with this, they actually moved that earnout money all to the upfront one-time payout.
Bravo. Bravo.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. And I mean, and so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, holy shit. I totaled up these numbers, and I'm like, and I'm looking down at the table. I'm like, when I look up, I need to know what I'm saying, And I look up, and the CEO, a tall guy, is leaned over the table with his hand out, ready for me to shake it. I was like, holy shit. Okay.
Did you shake it, or did you?
Yeah, I shook it. I shook it, and it kind of blew me away. And I went downstairs after that meeting, and I sat down in my car, and I took a picture of the paper where I wrote the numbers and texted it to my wife. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I just sold Gatorworks. And so, but yeah, it worked out. That was 7 years ago now. We closed on July 31st. of 2017. And I did have an employment contract for 4 years. Um, but we've never had to really refer to anything in that contract. They've been uh, more than accommodating and just great people to work with. And it's a very uncommon story. I mean, you hear about CEO founders that sell their business and they stay on for the very minimal
And
amount of time required. And
did you get the
so
office? Did you get the cool
I
office?
did. I did. They built out a beautiful office for me. I did.
How, how
Yeah.
long was the due diligence? Because here's the deal that happens a lot is they'll initially agree like to a number and you'd be like, holy shit, like, honey, we're multimillionaires. But then you start thinking about that and then they start going through the books and the due diligence. They're like, you're worth this because you're mainly project work and there's no predictability and that kind of stuff. How long was the due diligence and did they come back and kind of lessen the deal?
Yeah, so the letter of intent was in mid-April, and the due diligence they wanted to sign June 30th, but we were actually having our first child who was actually born June 23rd. So we all agreed, okay, let's push it to July 31st. So the due diligence ended up being, I guess, a little over 90 days, give or take, and it was very just stressful. I mean, from my perspective, I'm trying to make sure that I'm going to get every bit of what they said in that LOI and what we shook our hands on, kind of to your point, Jason. And they were very reasonable around it. I was very worried about some different aspects of it. One just random example I'll tell you is I remember at the time our web hosting um, was billed largely in the month of January, set on an annual, billing schedule.
Yeah. So you were
And
paid for all that work that they don't. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
So that
They're not
came
doing
off, right?
well. So they actually left it in. I thought they were going to take it out. I know.
What,
I know.
what really?
Yeah.
Wow. Because
Yeah.
the day before I sold, we were always the king of getting paid as much money up as possible from our clients for websites, right?
Yep.
Because think about, especially with websites, the clients are always the biggest holdup. So we actually changed the payment terms to be like, you're going to pay us 50% up front, a quarter halfway through or a certain date, whichever comes first, and a quarter at the end or whichever comes first. So a lot of times we were paid for a lot of these clients. So the day before, they were like, hey, this much money is coming out of the offer. I was like, I thought that was kind of scummy, but I was like, it's still pretty big.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. No, I fully expected that as well. Yeah, it's just basic revenue recognition.
What about the cash in your bank account? Was that yours too?
Um. Oh, good
For
question.
the business.
Yeah. So
And I presume this was an asset purchase, right?
yeah. Yeah. So wait, let me think on that. So asset versus stock purchase. Yeah, I think it was an asset purchase. That's right. And I think the money in the bank account did not go to me, if I'm
Okay.
remembering correctly. I think um and um the sorry, I'm forgetting
And I
I'm
just
trying to
remember
remember.
with
Yeah.
with ours, that was one of the negotiating parts that we wanted. We're
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah.
we want because we had a really big nut in our. I mean, we had
Yeah.
a big staff, so we were like, no, we want to split that with my business partner. Like, we get that.
That's interesting.
Um,
So
just turning it over.
right. So I do remember one piece that was interesting was how do you value the goodwill associated with the brand and that sort of thing. And so that was also an interesting conversation. And they were very reasonable about that. I mean, really almost probably was to my favor of how much value they put on just the goodwill.
Yeah,
And so yeah.
that's fantastic. I always love the success stories where and especially too of where where you guys were when you sold and where you're at now, that's a great return for them. So honestly, like looking at this, it's a win-win for all parties, which is how it should all be. Like I'm tired of people going, "I'm going to stick you on this and I'll get you on the next one." It's just like
Yeah.
if you can try to figure out how to make it work. And I'm glad that you kept saying no and you knew your number in your head. There's a lot of times like when we have our experiences or our events, and I'll ask our members, I'll say, "What's your number?" And people really don't know the number a lot of times. And I'm like, you need to think about that because there's so many people out there that will buy it because we want the option to sell it. But if you don't
Mhm.
have a number in place and know why, like just don't pick a number like 50 million, 100 million. Well, why that? Well, then I'll be able to do X. I'm like, well, you could already do that now. Um, so like what's the real number? And then when they say yes, let it go. It's not your baby. Who cares? Like it's just a business and you can start over.
That's right. That's right. And that one took me a little while to realize. And so kind of in in my situation, when I sold the business, they were very they were very hands off initially. And so to be honest, I kind of forgot I didn't even own the business anymore. I sold it July 31st, 2017. The rest of 2017, definitely all of 18, I operated the same exact way I always did. And a lot of my comp and perks, they were able to leave in place. So I didn't really, my lifestyle I didn't feel anything different. And they were not really, to be honest, they really weren't holding me accountable. Now it helped that the business was doing very well. We were growing. So they were kind of like, okay, well, we'll just probably, we'll just stay out of his way.
Yeah.
And so really it wasn't until COVID when I realized like, oh crap, that's right. I don't own this business. And when they were asking for, okay, we need to hop on weekly, or it might have even been daily in the beginning of COVID, we need to hop on daily executive team Zoom calls. We need to, and we ended up doing just fine during COVID. But I think the initial shock of it all was kind of my first taste, kind of a first reminder that I didn't actually own it.
Yeah. Well, congrats. That's awesome. And thanks for sharing the story and with everyone listening. And if you guys want to get to a point where you do want to sell your agency or you're getting close or you want to get it to a point where you have the option, definitely reach out to us and see there's a new asset that I put together for all of you that you can check out. And if you go to swank.it, it's advanced agency training. It's anywhere from generating more leads and better clients, the perfect offer to really get those clients and close faster and build the right sales team that doesn't depend on you. And then also how you can scale your agency. These are all free resources that we put out there. So make sure you go to swank.it. And until next time, have a swank day. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, make sure you click on the link on the screen or check out your most popular podcast platform where the full episode is there. And until next time, have a swank day. What are you doing? Go check it out. Click on the link. I'll see you soon.